Okay, so we are now recording. So, as I said, good evening to everyone. Our talk this evening is the challenges of developing a new medical device. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Muhammad Sadiq, who is the co-founder and technical lead at Active Needle Technology Ltd, a medical device company based in Culham in Oxfordshire. Dr. Sadiq is a chartered mechanical engineer and has over 10 years experience working in the medical device sector. So I'll hand over to Dr. Sadiq.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Brian, for the introduction and opportunity to deliver a talk on this forum. Before I begin, I'd just like to make a couple of brief points. Number one, the topic that I'm covering today is a huge topic, and it's not possible to cover it all in the allocated 40 minutes that we have today. In fact, I believe that it needs a series of lectures coupled with some seminars or workshops for a good learning experience. Having said that, the intention today is to give you an overview of the entire product development life cycle of a medical device and explain with examples some of the key aspects of the life cycles and I hope actually I make this 1 hour worthwhile for you. And the second point is that this is my second lecture on this topic, but I'd like to make this a regular thing. And for me to be able to do this effectively, I would like to collect as much feedback as possible. So I'd really appreciate it if you could just spare some time and fill out the feedback form that will be shared with you after this talk. Just to add some credibility to this lecture, just like to give you a very brief overview of the organization that I work for. As Brian introduced, I'm the inventor, founder, and technical lead of Active Needle Technology Ltd. We are a medical device company based in Culham area, Oxfordshire, and what we do is we develop ultrasonic needles for a range of medical and medical aligned markets. We have a number of patents, and we have been recognized at various forums, including we were the recipient of Commended Innovation Award by the Institute of Physics. Essentially, what Active Needle has is a platform ultrasonic technology that induces microscopic vibrations in needles, and these microscopic highly rapid vibrations, they convey a number of important properties to needles, which makes these needles do wonderful things in a variety of applications. For example, it makes the biopsy needles more visible under ultrasound imaging, which is very useful for deep tissue biopsy. It reduces pain associated with needle puncture, which makes it very attractive for tattooing. And it also improves drug distribution for intratumoral drug delivery applications. I would like to start with a quote that I came across some time ago by Eric Steuben. He's the SVP at Calixo. What he says is that at the end of the day, it's all about better outcomes, less invasive treatments, faster surgeries, and reduced cost. We can accomplish all of these things in tandem through technology and innovation. I think Eric is spot on there. This is exactly what your thinking should be as a medical device designer or developer. But if you read between the lines, Eric is highlighting something very important here. When you are designing a product, a non-medical device, for example, you would normally think of the end user alone. But when it comes to a medical device, you would need to go beyond the end user and look into the end use as well. And this is where the other stakeholders come into play. So clinicians are definitely the end users, but they're not the buyer of a medical device. So the healthcare providers, like for example, NHS, they are the buyer, but they're not the ultimate beneficiaries. The ultimate beneficiaries are the patients. So you have to take all the stakeholders into account when it comes to medical device development. The other important point I'd like to make here is that if you understand this discipline very well, it will give you a great satisfaction to know that your product has saved someone's leg, eye, or even life. Equally, it can contribute to the loss of leg, eye, and even life as well, which is why the medical device industry is very highly regulated industry. It's one of the highly regulated industry. So this brings us nicely to the outline of the talk. We'll start with some fundamentals, or shall I say the language or the jargon we normally use in the medical device industry, and then we'll dive into the main topic, which is essentially the medical device product development life cycle and the challenges associated with it. And at the end, I will just briefly cover the common mistakes made during this development process. So what is a medical device? There is a long definition which you can find in the articles of the medical device regulations, but broadly, it's a medical device means any instrument, apparatus, appliance, software, implant, or any other article intended by the manufacturer to be used alone or in combination for human beings for one or more medical purposes. This is a very broad definition, but there are some borderline products that may or may not be classified as medical devices. And a classic example of this is a toothpaste. A toothpaste can potentially be classified as a cosmetic, a medicinal product, or even a medical device, depending on its composition, mode of action, and how the product is presented. For example, so cosmetic toothpaste, they clean teeth as part of your daily oral care routine. But then you have toothpaste that treat tooth wear or gum disease or tooth decay. And this is where the mode of actions come into play. So the toothpaste that, for example, prevents sensitivity by physically blocking dentine tubules in the teeth, they are classified as medical devices. But then similarly, the toothpaste that address the problem by pharmacological means, they are classified as medicinal products. So which is why it's very important to decide whether a product is a medical device or a medicinal product. And how do you do that? You actually look at two main things. One is the intended purpose of the product, taking into account the way the product is presented. And then you have to look into the method by which the principal intended action is achieved. Medical device classification. So if you are a manufacturer of a medical device and plan to market your product in either the US or EU markets, you have to classify your medical device according to the rules of the respective regulatory agencies. And I'll come to the regulatory agency bit in the next slide. The classification of a medical device is a risk-based approach that determines essentially the level of harm posed to the patients. In general, class 1 includes essentially all medical devices that have the lowest risk, and class 3 are those medical devices with the highest risk. The other day when I was reading a book on medical devices, I came across this terminology of medical device police. And I think it's a nice way of presenting the competent authorities. So these are the authorities that essentially have the power of life and death over your device and your company. So in Europe, we have European Medicine Agency. In UK, we have IMechE, and in the US, we have FDA. And then comes notified bodies. These are essentially the legal entities that license by the competent authorities, for example, EMA in Europe. And these are the bodies that the applicants, the medical device companies, we talk to and get audited by. One thing which is important to understand here is that the applicant or the holder of the CE mark to market are ultimately responsible for the safety of the device. So safety is very important when it comes to medical devices. Quality management system. Now we all talk about quality, but what is it and how do you achieve it? Defining quality and aligning the definition to relevant regulations require an approach that we call quality management system. It is essentially quality management system ensures that the quality of the product is consistently achieved as the device as the organization grows, for example. So if I am as a designer, if I have designed something and then I decide to leave my organization, somebody else comes to replace me, they should be able to carry out the design process in the same way as I have done it. So really, quality management system is all about documenting everything. So people who are coming later on or as the device is growing, people should be able to consistently produce the medical devices. We often hear about standards like 9001 and 13485. And 9001 is a standard that can be applied to any businesses, and it's focused on customer satisfaction. But when it comes to medical devices, we tend to use ISO 13485. And the focus of 13485, although it's based on 9001, it is primarily focused on regulatory compliance and risk management. Typical elements of quality management system includes quality policy, quality manual, procedures, work instructions, and records. Plenty goes in there, but essentially an effective quality management system should help you reduce product defects, improve customer satisfaction, manage quality risks, and most importantly, ensure compliance with the regulations. So now, the product development life cycle, one of the main topic of this talk. There are different ways of approaching this. Some people tend to use what we call waterfall process, and some use the famous V diagram. The key thing here, the two main aspects of this. One is the phases, and the other is the distinction between verification and validation, which is very important. So verification is essentially did you design, it's a question actually, did you design the product right? And validation is about whether you designed the right product. And the difference is that verification verifies the product specification, the engineering specification, whereas the validation verifies or validates the user requirements. Now, this is the process that I normally follow, which is essentially same as the water flow process, but it's a bit more detailed. It's a phase gate approach. You do each phase, and then you sign off, and then you move to the next phase. It is detailed and looks very overwhelming, but it just makes sense because it helps you tick all the boxes as you go along. The important thing to highlight is that this is not a one-person job when it comes to developing a medical device, and you have to essentially have a team. You have an R&D person, you have the project management person, you have a quality assurance responsibility, and then you have to have obviously marketing, sales people as well. So what I'm going to do now is I will go through essentially each of these phases and quote the example of two of my projects, the projects that I've worked on. One is the tattoo device we refer to as, we call it Tranquil, and the biopsy device. So phase zero, the project initiation phase, you probably, before you get to this, you've identified a need or a problem, and you probably carried out some background research. What you need to do is you need to, in this phase, understand the market size and identify your user profile, identify your competitors, learn about the competing technologies and the limitations. And the other important thing is you have to do some freedom of operation search as well. I'm just going to give you an example of the tattoo project that we worked on. We were lucky enough that we applied for this project with University of Cambridge Business School. So it became as a case study project for the students, and they did actually the initial work for us when it comes to understanding the market size and just really understanding the user profile in the market for the tattoo device. Once the need is established, then you go on to outline the project. This is a pretty standard thing you would apply to any project as well. Project planning comes in as an important part of it. I normally tend to use the work package-based approach with clearly defined deliverables and milestones, and this helps you really complete each phase and then sign off before you move to the next phase. Just helps you streamline things nicely. You would obviously when it's just a piece of advice, when you are doing a project plan, you would build in some contingency in the plan as well, just a bit of a cushion. Things can go wrong, and then and obviously when it comes to project planning, finance come into way as well, and it's just important to again bring in a bit of a cushion in there, and keeping track of the finances. It just helps. It's very critical for reconciliation purposes later on. And the end point really of this phase zero is you actually have an approval for the project, so you can get cracking with the design and development activities. Phase one is the design and development planning, where you look at, you essentially come up with a design and development plan. You identify, you describe the approach and the procedure in detail, how you're going to go about designing and developing this particular medical device. Roles and responsibilities are very important, as I've highlighted before as well. It's a team project. It's a team. As a team, you have to achieve this. You also list applicable standards. Now, this is an important part. There's a guidance document available on the UK government website. If you search for designated standards for medical devices, it lists all the standards that are applicable to medical devices, and then you can choose the ones that are relevant or applicable to your medical device, and then you can study them and look at collect the requirements that way. And obviously, you plan for the risks as well. Project risks is one thing, and then you have to look at the product risk as well, for which there is a very important standard ISO 14971, which is quoted several times in the ISO 13485 standard, the quality management system for medical devices. And if you just look at this image here on the right, so it's just as a flow diagram that we tend to use for all of our projects, which is highlighting all the key documents that you're meant to be compiling along the way, which we'll obviously touch upon as well. But the key thing is all these documents are part of this DHF, which stands for Design History File. And this is perhaps the most important document that you will compile at the end of the cycle that you need to submit to your notified bodies for regulatory approval. During this phase one, you would collect user requirements. You've obviously, by this time, you would have looked at the standards as well, so you are aware of the regulatory requirements, but you're also, obviously, it's very important that you you collect user requirements. You would interview your end users mainly. So again, I'll refer to our tattoo project. We went to a number of tattoo studios, not just consumer ones, but we actually went to spoke to some nurses and clinicians as well who carry out medical tattooing, for example. You would look into the user workflow as well, which is also very important. It highlights some of the key requirements. I mean, just a simple example. So what we have is, if you recall the picture that I shared for the tattoo device, we have a handpiece and we have a console. And one of the things that came out quite clearly from understanding the user workflow is which way is the cable going to come out, because it's the device, the handpiece is connected via cable to this console. And what we agreed on by speaking to the tattoo artist and understanding the workflow is that the cable needs to come out from the front, because if it goes from the back, it can come in the way of various things in a typical tattoo studio setup. So understanding workflow and understanding how the users normally use the products, every minute detail needs to be captured properly. Obviously, you will look at the human factors as well. If you're obviously, when it comes to a medical device, it will be used most likely by clinicians of different age group, different genders. If it's a handheld, obviously, device, then you have to look into, for example, the size of the palm. If they have to apply certain torque to tighten up or loosen anything into the medical device, then you have to look at the anthropometric data as well of applying torque to do a particular function. One very important thing is, whenever you're capturing the requirements, you have to allocate strength. A very common thing that is used in medical device industry is shell versus should. So shell, any requirements that are classified shell are must-have requirements, and should are nice-to-have requirements. For example, just quoting back the tattoo example, so the tattoo artists normally tend to the longest session they would do is 8 hours long, and they obviously they need to make sure that the device they're using is obviously easy to use, and it's lightweight as well, so it's not adding fatigue to the end user. So in this case, the requirement was that the handpiece needs to weigh less than 200 grams, because that's current standards, current market trend, which is a shell. But it would be even nicer, or nice to have thing, if it is less than 150 grams, and that becomes a should. I mean, you should try and meet both shell and should requirements, but shell is a mandatory. You have to meet. If you are developing a product that has some competition in the market, it's a very good idea to look at these competing products. Look at if there's any are there any limitations they have, so you can address them as well. For example, in tattoo application, we had there's what we call stroke settings. Normally devices come with a fixed stroke, 3.5 or 4. It just basically means how hard the needle hits the skin. And if you have to use, and it varies from application to application actually, but if the tattoo artist has a device that has a 3 millimeter stroke, for example, then they have to use 4 millimeter. They will actually have to, in some of the devices, they will have to change a bit of the mechanism, or they will have to entirely change replace the motor. So one thing what we did was in our development work, we actually designed a mechanism that allowed the tattoo artist to change the stroke with just single device. So we gave them the options of, I have a device with me here. They gave them the option to just simply rotate the top part of the device to let them choose different stroke settings. Avoid complications. So when it comes to medical devices, you can look at there are databases out there where you can look at any accidents that have happened with the medical devices, any failures. One of the things that we came across with our biopsy device, for example, conventional biopsy devices, some of them are automated. So you go very close to your target, and when you press the button, it throws the biopsy needle forward, the sample collection needle forward. And if you cannot see the needle very well, it can actually hit surrounding tissues, damage nerves as well. So what we did was we built in a mechanism in the device whereby it was still automated, semi-automated. So you would position the needle at the desired target location, then you pull back the mechanism, arm it, and then fire it. So you don't really get that forward throw, which you essentially normally is a blind throw. Concept design and evaluation. So that's where you start coming up with ideas of how the device profile looks like, the user interface, etc. One of the things that I've learned with experience is that it's always good to come up with multiple ideas, co-develop ideas, and choose the one that works best. And I cannot stress enough, it is very important to involve users throughout this development process, because you do not want to go to the user with a finished product to find out that there is something that you just not captured at all and it's just not acceptable. So it's very important to keep the user in the loop, even with the earlier prototypes. Take the prototypes to the user, get their feedback. As I've stressed a couple of times already, mentioned that medical device is all about risks management, and the focus is on the risk. So determining the risks is very, very important part. There are multiple ways of doing this. You would do hazard analysis, what could potentially go wrong with your medical device, and then once you have some sort of a design ready, then you actually look at the FME as well, where you actually individually pick up the various components. If it is an assembly, you pick up the individual component and see what and look at actually what could potentially happen as a result of a particular failure of a particular component. For all of our devices, for any application, we have some kind of standard hazards that we normally look at. Since it's an ultrasonic device, we have to look at the acoustic hazards. We have electrical part to it as well. So we look at electrical, mechanical, biochemical, environmental hazards. Then there are obviously project risk as well, where you have to obviously look at the I briefly mentioned freedom of search for patents before, but you would need to keep on searching for any potential patents that may infringe your that your design may infringe, and you have to work around it. Phase 2 is the detailed design and development phase. Here, one of the important things that you have to consider is the industrial design. Industrial design or product design language is a term that is normally used to describe how the brand values and customer insights are translated into how a product looks, feels, and function. We again, quoting tattoo example, it was quite a recent project. That's why I'm quoting it as much as I can. We were developing obviously this ultrasonic tattoo device that results in low pain. So it's more like a premium product. So we had to give it a bit of a premium look to it. So there is a lot that goes in there when it comes to the industrial design. I personally don't have experience with industrial design. We actually engaged a design consultancy for this purpose, and I think they did a fantastic job because it did eventually worked out really well. By the way, this particular project we were able to license to an already established tattoo company, and I'm pretty sure actually that the design language part of it plays a role in that. Just like phase one, concept design, phase two, there is ongoing prototyping and informal evaluation going on. This is obviously there is a bit more prototyping involved, while the phase one is just looking at how the device looks and everything. In phase two, you're actually looking at the mechanisms and looking at the wire managements and the case of our tattoo device, for example, and the same goes with our biopsy device as well. So this biopsy device here, where we had to actually do a lot of iterations on the biopsy taking mechanism before we finalize this particular design. Again, as I said before, you have to involve the end users, people who will be ultimately using the product, and take their feedback on board. Something very briefly to touch upon. Obviously, I've mentioned IP a couple of times. So just to define it, an invention to be patentable, it has to be novel with respect to the prior art. It needs to involve inventive stuff, so inventive step. So it should not be obvious to the person in the field, and it must be industrially applicable. So this is one of the things I've learned by obviously with experience, that when you are filing a patent, it's a long process, and it's a costly process because whichever country you go to, you have to pay their own filing fees as well. So the way you would normally go about is you would try and get the protection in countries where a product like yours can be manufactured or can be sold. So you don't have to go and get products in the whole world, because that's going to be very, very expensive. So for us, our normal standard set of countries is that we focus on the EU, we focus on the US, China and Japan mainly. Patent validity is 20 years, and a single patent application normally costs £10,000, but then there are some ongoing fees as well to do with the office actions. So when you file a patent, you get reports back from the offices, and then there's administration involved in it. Again, I mean, it's not something that you would like to do yourself. You would actually get an IP attorney to deal with this. Verification and validation. So again, I highlighted the difference between verification and validation. This essentially confirms that you have designed the right product, and the way you would normally go about this is all the risks that you have identified, all the requirements that you have captured, they should inform you what kind of test you need to be doing to evidence that you have designed the right product. And if you have captured these requirements and risk properly, you should be able to test multiple requirements and risks with just one test. For example, I'm quoting Tetra device, but the same applied for our biopsy device as well. Continuous use in Tetra device for 8 hours and maximum operating speed and ultrasound intensity. If you do that one test, you are testing for a stakeholder requirement that the device should be able to function consistently over longer sessions. A product requirement that the integrity of the needle, cartridge, and the handpiece is maintained, so it doesn't get hot, it doesn't break into pieces. Then one of the hazards we identified was because there's ultrasonic energy going in, constant vibration, things to heat up. So you have to take into account, and that as well need to measure the temperature of the needle. And then obviously some design failure mode effect analysis tests as well. We were able to capture all that with just one test. Phase 3, so that's the verification validation testing. You've done the planning in phase 2. You've put together all the tests that you need. You write protocols, and this phase 3 you essentially get the pilot devices built. You would also get things, sterilize your medical devices, and you're essentially getting devices ready for the actual verification validation testing, and for validation if you're doing human testing, then obviously for that as well. Depending on the medical device that you are developing, you would have to do some specialist tests as well. In our case, when it comes to the biopsy device, we had to do EMC testing to basically see if there are any electromagnetic waves being produced by our device which may disrupt the environment. We had to do some histology testing to confirm that our ultrasonically vibrating needles are not affecting in any way negatively affecting the tissue collected. So we did a study where we took samples for using both conventional biopsy device and our biopsy device, and we sent to a histology lab. They carried out histological analysis and confirmed that both devices resulted in a similar quality of a specimen. And if you've done everything well, captured everything properly based on your quality management system, at the end you would have this technical file, and a big part of this technical file is your design history file document that I've covered right at the beginning of the talk. Phase 4 is design transfer activities. You would transfer your design to your CMOs, contract manufacturers, would put together SOPs and work instruction for volume production. And if everything has gone well, what you will get is obviously there is the regulatory process running in parallel. You will get audited by your notified body, but if everything is documented well and you've checked all the boxes, you should get a regulatory approval. So we were able to get a regulatory approval CE mark on our biopsy device. Phase 5 is where you would start, you would look into launching the product. You would put together IFUs, any presentation that you need to deliver to bring end users to speed and understanding how the device to be used, etc. You would keep on doing risk management side of things. Post-market surveillance becomes an important aspect, because once you have started selling the devices, then you have to keep track of anything that may be going wrong with the device, and you have to work on them. This brings us to the last slide, actually. Common mistakes in the product development life cycle. Technology not disruptive enough. And this could happen because the stakeholders are not engaged soon enough, and you haven't probably done your market research right. Poor requirement capture, misunderstanding or not defining the requirements up front. And that's why I stressed a lot at the beginning, actually, that you try and capture as even the smallest of the requirements, try and get as many requirements as possible, that you don't end up with missing out some of the key requirements. Poor risk management and regulatory planning. QA not engaged soon enough. Again, as I said, it's not a one-person job. There are obviously people dedicated that they have the experience of quality assurance. You have to involve them early on. They can guide you with. I mean, if you have a QMS system already in place, which is a very good thing, but if you don't, in our case, when we started up, obviously, we had to have somebody, and this person was really helpful in just keeping it right when it comes to just putting together all the documents that we needed for regulatory submission. Failure to employ human factors research. Again, so when I talked about, gave an example of the maybe a palm size for an end user, that's exactly what I was talking about. This is something that we've actually gone through for the biopsy device in particular. We we realized that we were only working with a handful of clinicians to start with, and it was all fine until when we got to the late stage of the validation studies. We had actually one clinician who apparently was a female clinician who had a relatively smaller hand, and she just was struggling to. She just could not get could not even trigger. Prime the device, because she could not just rest her palm here, because it wasn't, her palm was not big enough to get supported here. So that's something we need to work on in our next generation of devices. Product limitations not identified properly, failed user evaluation. That refers to the risks and the FMEA. You have to do really thorough hazard and risk analysis, and plan the verification testing accordingly. Fail to address the health economics and benefits question. Again, I mean, end user, obviously, you've taken end user into account, which is very good, but then healthcare provider, as I said, is the buyer for the medical devices, for the device that you develop, and they would be interested in knowing what are the benefits when it comes to cost savings and from patient perspective. So you should be able to, when planning for the validation testing, human trials, etc., you have to make sure that you have taken that point into account. You probably have to do a health economic study. You'll have to involve a health economist, a statistician as well, so you can really collect the data that you need to present the benefit case to the healthcare providers when it comes to getting into market. Brian, I think that's, in a nutshell, the entire product development cycle. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. While I'm waiting for people to put their questions in the chat, perhaps I can kick off with a question. I was quite interested in your quote right at the start in terms of the three potential stakeholders, if you like, but I'm assuming that they vary, particularly between your tattoo and your biopsy products. Whereas with the tattoo, I would assume that the end user, or the person who's getting the tattoo, is quite an important part, because if they get a good experience, they're likely to recommend it to others. whereas for the biopsy, the medical professionals who's actually doing the biopsy is probably the key.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm glad that you made the point. Now, because tattooing is not as tightly regulated, especially the consumer tattooing market is not as tightly regulated as medical devices, we were actually able to get the device tested on human volunteers in the UK and in Germany as well. So all we had to make sure was that the needles were sterile, and and this came out very, very clearly in our initial testing, that the people who were getting the tattoo, because one of the things we were really looking for is the pain reduction in tattooing, and the end user really can't tell the pain reduction part. They can feel how easy it is for them to draw a line, for example, because the vibrations were making it easier and smoother. But ultimately, the pain reduction part of it, it was down to the people getting the tattoos, and we consistently get about 4-point reduction in pain compared to commercially available devices. And one of the things that we collected in our user testing was whether the person getting the tattoo would be willing to get a tattoo made with this device, or maybe even willing to pay premium price for an ultrasonic tattoo device, and we got really positive response for that.
Okay, right. We've got a number of questions now. So if I read these out, so thank you for the information, very insightful. When considering user requirements, you mentioned utilizing ISO standards, but I've noted that there is a variance in policy between hospitals regarding medical procedures, infection control, etc. How have you handled these considerations within your product development regarding prioritization? Are there specific medical requirements management procedures, such as variants of houses of quality?
Good question. So the device, the biopsy device in particular that we have been working with, it's not something new. It's already very well established. And we did not have to look into any other requirements beyond what's already there in standards and the requirements that were captured by from the users. Obviously, you would involve hospitals as well. You would speak to the procurement and try and understand if there are any particular requirements that you have to take into account. But in our case, especially for the biopsy device, there were no additional requirements that we had to consider.
Okay, so I think I've got two rather similar questions. Really interesting talk, thank you. How long does a project typically take, and how much contingency percentage-wise do you build into the plan? And then there's another question here. What was the difference in how long the phases took for your two products, and why was there a difference, if any?
How do you go about creating the DHF file and do the notification format?
Oh, well, I think taking that as a separate question.
Yeah, okay. So when it comes to the how long does a project typically take, that depends a lot on the medical device that you are actually developing. So I think if you recall one of the initial slides, I spoke about the various classes of medical devices. The lower the class, so class 1, there are less regulatory hurdles to cross. Class 2A and then 2B is a bit more. Class 3 is when you're dealing with pacemakers, for example. and there are a lot more requirements to address, to meet. So that is one of the main factors that defines how long a project can be. I mean, for our biopsy device, we started off in 2016. I mean, I can't really give you a number because COVID came in between as well. It slowed down a lot of things. We made, I won't say we made an error, but we had a supplier who was not 1345 qualified, let's put it this way. So we had a lot of struggle there, compiling all the documentation that added to it, and then for a startup in particular, you're always funding is tight, so you sometimes you have to pause things and then pick up when you have the funding. So I mean, typically what they say is let's put it this way. Typically they say for a medical device from concept to market, it takes close to about 8 to 10 years. But again, don't quote me on that. It depends on how complex the device is.
Yeah. Okay. And then how do you go about creating the DHF technical file? Do the notified bodies require a specific format?
No. So the quality management system can be tailored to your organization and the kind of devices that you are producing. The standard 13485 gives you a lot of information on what needs to be included. You would include things that are relevant. You won't include things that are not relevant to your product. Um, Essentially, and that's why it's very important to have an experienced quality person in your team who would guide you along the way, and who would make sure that you've covered all the things that are relevant to the device that you are producing. And then when it comes to getting the audits done, you would just need to I mean, your notified body would probably ask why you haven't done this, and you would say, actually, we haven't done this because this is not applicable to our device. And if they're happy with it, they're happy with it.
Okay, thank you. Did you draw on any existing products or data as references during the development of the tattoo machine? And in your experience, which stage typically incurs higher costs, R&D or the verification process?
Drawing existing products. Yes. So in the tattoo machines, we started off with limited really data on existing devices. Really, we were relying a lot on the user feedback on what the users were requiring. But what we were doing was along the way, and especially when it came to the testing at the end, we when I said particularly quoted that we were getting 4-point reduction, we were actually getting the reduction in comparison with a commercially available device. So we were doing a head-to-head testing along the way. Let's say typically in the higher cost R&D or the verification process. I would say R&D is more costly because a lot of work goes in there. It takes a lot of time, and verification validation can be done quickly. I'm not talking about clinical trials. Clinical trials take a long time, and they're expensive as well. But general verification validation. So if you're talking about tattoo device, for example, it's shorter and less expensive. Again, it depends how well you have planned these activities. Um, I mean, yeah, R&D is generally expensive, but it can be even more expensive if you've frozen the design, you got to a stage where you started testing and you found out that you've missed on something important, and then you have to go all the way back and make some changes to the design, and it just adds more time and makes it very costly as well. So again, planning and keeping the user in the loop along the way is very, very important.
Okay, that I think is the end of the questions that have been asked. Somebody is typing, so just give it a moment to see if there's something more coming. Doesn't always mean that anything's going to come, but yeah, I guess that I mean, as in many things, getting the R&D stage right saves you a lot of time down the line.
And I think another thing that I've learned is, I mean, often obviously you're so much involved in this process, you sometimes obviously I won't say you get fed up actually, but there are certain minor things you see and you're like, let's just deal with it afterwards. And that can be one of the main mistakes that you can potentially do. If you spot an issue, you better resolve it there and then, because if you leave it till the end, it becomes a lot bigger and it can cost you a lot more. Because I mean, just a simple thing. Again, for example, I can quote this biopsy device. I mean, it wasn't any issue that we any requirement that we did not capture or anything, but we have this biopsy mechanism in there. It's so you basically you prime it, it clicks here, exposes the needle to collect the sample, and then you basically press the button to launch it. Now this is old, it's not quite working, but there you go. So it fires. And what happened was, initially it wasn't firing when we had the first molding done, and then when it comes to the designing plastic parts for injection molding, there's an approach that you consider. It's a material off or material on. Ideally, the way you would design parts, you would go with material off approach. That if you have to make anything, if you have to make any modification, you should just take the material off and make the modification to make things work. And that's the cheaper option, as opposed to material on, where you actually have to add material to the tool,
Yeah.
And which can be a lot more costly and time consuming.
Okay, there is another question. After launch, do you get to support the users in real-time use of the devices?
Yes, so that's part of the training that you would do, in-person training. I have been to hospitals with our marketing team. Just on the side, actually, I was looking at how it's normally done, and they were explaining how it needs to be done, explaining every single part of it. And once trained, then obviously you don't have to be there, but obviously as part of your quality management system, the way you've defined it in your SOP, you have to be in some way. You need to be in touch to keep track of any issues that may pop up, and you have to deal with it.
Okay, and then there's a question for me. Will the recording be shared if possible, please? The intention is to get the recording of this talk onto the IMechE YouTube channel. And that will take a while, and given the holiday coming up, it will be into the new year before we can do that. I think that probably brings things to a close very neatly. So thank you very much indeed. It was an interesting talk. From the comments there, I think a lot of people found it helpful. There's a lot of detail there, and I think people will benefit if they can sort of view it again on the YouTube channel and pick up some of the detail that maybe was difficult to absorb on the time. So yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Brian.
And just to remind everyone, I will be sending out the feedback form, and Muhammad would be very grateful if you could provide him with some feedback so that he can improve the talk, and maybe will give us something else in due course.
And if they have any more questions, I don't know, Brian, what's the policy like?
If anyone's got any questions after reflecting on things, please send them to me and I will pass them on.
Very good.
Okay. Happy Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone.
Have a wonderful holiday time. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thanks very much. That went well. I hope you found it useful.
Yeah, no, I think it went well. Yeah, I needed a lot more water during this talk. I've started noticing actually for the past few months actually. I think if I keep on talking rather quickly, I struggle talking. I need a lot of water to keep going. But yeah, no, but no, I think it was a good experience. The questions were really, really good as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the questions show that people were engaged.
Yes, I think, yeah, and obviously I did my best to make it as simple as possible. But yeah, I mean, as I said, actually, it's a huge topic, and you just cannot cover everything in about an
No,
hour.
no, no. Well,
Um,
no, you never can on these.
yeah,
And I mean, I think if you can make people think about things, then that's a key. That's a key result.
absolutely. By the way, Brian, is it possible to get a copy of the questions? Somehow?
Um, Hang on, let me just remember to stop the recording. I always do
Actually,
this.
oh, I see.